hot, and we've had a couple of showers, which has kind of gotten the temperature a little bit better. So I'm hoping that the next few days are going to be nice. What about our panelists? How's the weather in how's the weather in Los Angeles? Abira?
It is pretty hot for the most part, but the past 2 days have been slightly cooler. So weird adjustment, but overall pretty good.
Nice. And what about you, Tanisha?
It's been quite hot the last few days, like over 30 degrees. It's nice. You have a bunch of stuff outdoors now.
Nice.
It's not raining and sad like London usually is.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. And we're very excited to be hosting a first of a kind webinar today, where we're going to hear from students about their journey from college to careers. In the past, we've actually had webinars where we've had students sharing their application journeys with us and talking a little bit about how they started early or how they really focused on their essays to help them stand apart from their peers. This time around, we're going to hear directly from the students that have achieved what many of you aspire to achieve. So I'm hoping that you can use their advice and implement it into your strategies and plans. I'm going to move on to very quickly introducing myself. My name is Mehnaz Jaffer, and I head the undergraduate services at the Red Pen together with my co-manager, Sheetal Vora. And for those of you who don't know much about the Red Pen and are joining us for the first time today, we are an independent education consultancy based out of Mumbai. And we are very proud to say that over 92% of our students have received offers to their top 3 choices. Not only that, we also have had our students receive over $20 million in scholarships over the last 5 years. The other thing that is unique about the Red Pen is that we have affiliations with many international organizations like the IECA, NACAC, IACAC, and all these professional affiliations actually help us network with professional colleagues and with admissions officers and help us keep abreast with the latest talents and changes in the application processes. A little bit about what we do at the Red Pen. We have 6 different verticals, and we actually provide standalone and end-to-end services. We work with students right from providing them school choices, day school choices, boarding school choices. We also help students right from 8th grade with their profile building. Once that is done, we work with them on their undergraduate applications to global destinations and India too. Other than that, we also help them with their postgraduate applications, MBA applications, and we are also the in-house counselors for the German school in Mumbai. And now moving on to the best part of our webinar today, which is getting to know the panelists and finding out a little bit more from them about their personal experiences. I'm going to very quickly introduce Ratan. Ratan Manglani has been the head recruiter for Amazon. And prior to that, he has been part of Goldman Sachs and has been part of a lot of campus recruitments. Thank you, Ratan, for being part of our webinar today. Ratan is a proud father of 2 twin boys, and he's actually taken the time from his paternity leave to come and join us here and to be able to actually inspire our youth to actually try and strive to get their dream job. So Ratan, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mehnaz. It's my absolute pleasure to be here as well this afternoon. Very, very good afternoon to one and all. As Mehnaz mentioned, my name is Ratan. I've been working with Amazon for about a year now as a recruitment leader for early careers recruiting across the entire Asia Pacific region. Prior to this, I worked with Goldman Sachs. I was vice president for campus recruiting across all the tracks of recruiting that we used to look into, which includes engineering, MBA recruiting, as well as non-technical undergraduate recruiting. So my pleasure to be here and looking forward to this discussion today.
Thank you so much, Ratan, for that. And moving on to our student panelists, we have a diverse group of students from various different backgrounds who are going to be sharing their personal stories with us. They are alumni of very selective colleges like Carnegie Mellon, UCLA, Emory, Imperial, and Cambridge. And I'm going to very quickly request you all to introduce yourselves, starting with you, Tanisha.
Hi guys, I'm Tanisha. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in India. I was born and brought up in Mumbai. I came to the UK for my undergrad and my master's. I did my undergrad in King's College London, and then I did my master's at Imperial. I just graduated last November, so not that long ago, and I started working at Google as an SRE. I've been at Google around 6-7 months now.
Thank-
Yeah. Well,
Thanks, Tanisha, for that. And over to you, Ayushi.
First, congratulations, Ratan. Happy Father's Day. What an incredible time.
Thank you.
I'm Ayushi. I just graduated from Emory University in 2021. I majored in psychology and now work as a news associate at CNN in DC.
And Ishan.
Yeah, hi. So I studied at Carnegie Mellon. I studied electrical and computer engineering. And while I was in college, I interned at a couple companies. I worked at a bank, and then I worked at Qualcomm. Currently, I work at Coinbase. I'm building a product called Coinbase Custody, which is basically private storage for people's cryptocurrency assets. And yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you, Ishan. I'm really sorry, but Maulik is actually taking a flight from the UK to Mumbai, and I think he's gotten delayed with that. So we'll move on to you, Abira, and maybe when he's able to join, we'll have him introduce himself.
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Abira, and I did my undergrad at UCLA, and I majored in gender studies, and then I went on to do my master's at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, and I got my clinical psychology degree, and I am on track to becoming a mental health therapist in the near future.
Thank you so much, Abira, for that. And thank you for the opportunity to host you all today on our webinar. And I think now it's time to move on to the part of the webinar that our audience is waiting for. What we've actually done with our webinar today is that we've actually put them into 3 different sections. The first section is where we're going to be talking about the academic majors and employability. And so I'm going to start with that now. And Ishan, I think I'm going to start with you more so because in the last week, the volatility with the cryptocurrency and the NFT space has kind of dominated the news. And it'd be nice to kind of hear from you directly a little bit about, firstly, your major, your electrical and computer engineering major, and how do you think that actually helped you get a job at Coinbase?
Yeah, sure. So I'll first talk about just electrical and computer engineering in general. So if you're unsure if you want to do software engineering or hardware engineering, electrical and computer engineering is a good major for that. A lot of people had the option to do software engineering internships, and then they moved on to hardware. Hardware engineering is closer to designing chips and building them. So doing this major helps you explore different opportunities while you're interning. An example of that is I worked at Qualcomm, which is a hardware company, and then I decided that wasn't for me. So I'm now doing software engineering. And then as for employability, the crypto market tends to be very volatile, yes. And as far as I've seen, a lot of the job opportunities in Silicon Valley tend to be around software engineering. Hardware engineering, there are just less companies working on that. But if you find your niche within hardware engineering, people are willing to pay you much more. So hardware engineering and robotics tend to be careers in that field where you can work at a niche and then get paid a lot more for whatever you're working on.
Thank you, Ishan, for that. And thank you for giving our audience clarity with software engineering and hardware engineering. That's a very, very common question that we get from our students. And I know I can keep talking to you about this area of interest because it's very, very popular. We see so many of our young students wanting to apply for computer engineering or computer science. So thank you for that. And I think I'm going to move on to you, Abira. Typically when we're counseling students, I see that they want to apply to majors like engineering, business, computer science, psychology. Not very often do I see students wanting to apply to unique majors like gender studies. So it'd be really nice if you can tell us a little bit about your gender studies major and how did you choose clinical psychology as a career path?
Sure, yeah. So gender studies is kind of a sect of sociology. It's very specific to gender. Feminist studies is sometimes what it's called in other campuses. And I actually stumbled upon it somewhat accidentally, but I'm so grateful for stumbling upon it the way I did, because I really enjoyed all the knowledge I was able to receive from studying that at UCLA. And, it's not a common major, that's for sure, but I think it's up and coming, and a lot of good work can be done through it. And, going into clinical psychology after gender studies is also not typical, but I kind of found that there was not enough out there in terms of the niche and the interconnectedness between gender and psychology, which kind of led me into thinking I could marry the two. And that kind of led me into getting my master's and looking more into clinical psychology with a specialty in gender.
Thank you, Abira, for that. I know that this is the need of the hour, so great career choice. I have another question for you, Abira. Had you decided to work after completing your undergraduate degree, do you think it would have been easy for you to find employment with an unconventional major like gender studies?
It's definitely possible. And, I know that typically people who do a gender studies major in their undergraduate typically either go on to obtaining a PhD in gender studies, or they maybe go into nonprofit work, which is, definitely out there. They maybe start their own nonprofit themselves. And also teaching is definitely an option as well. But like I said, the good thing is with clinical psychology, you don't need to have studied psychology in your undergrad. So as long as it, can kind of tie in some ways, I've seen people come into this graduate program for clinical psychology with gender studies, sociology, child development. There's an array of options.
Thanks, Abira, for providing our audience with that clarity. And it's so encouraging to hear your answer. And I'm really actually hoping that a lot more students are going to be open to studying different majors. So kudos to you on that. Ayushi, I'm going to move on to you now because your story is a little bit similar to Abira in the sense that you applied to Emory undecided, and then you declared psychology as a major, and you're now working in a completely different field. So if you can walk us through your journey of discovering media and communications while studying for a major in psychology, that would be great.
Yeah. Like Mehna said, I applied undecided. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to study. And when I applied, I was applying to mostly liberal arts colleges and with an undecided major. So even Emory University was just, I don't know, like the stars aligning for me. I was initially waitlisted there. And had committed to Boston University. It was when I got to Emory that I just started taking classes and I decided a major based on what my interest was. So psychology was something that I'd been interested in since the 10th grade. I took the AP of psychology and I also took it as one of my IB subjects. So I stuck through that. But it was actually through my extracurriculars that I found my passion for journalism. I started working for a college newspaper, and through that experience, I kind of found what I actually wanted to pursue. And that led to me kind of honing those skills necessary for that profession, such as research, which overlapped with my major. So I found that my major still helped me with my career in many ways.
Thanks, Ayushi, for that. So exploration seems to be the name of the game. I'm also very intrigued to hear from you, Ayushi, about your work as a news associate at CNN. What does your workday typically consist of?
Yeah, so the role that I'm in is a rotational program. It's for early career graduates. It's a special program that CNN has at its Washington, D.C. bureau. And students, or not students, well, graduates in the program help around in the bureau, in the studio, where they're shooting their shows and anchors are sitting. So I started off by operating the teleprompter and I was in the control room. So whatever you see in movies, like the excitement of breaking news, I got to live that, which is just what I live for every day. And now I'm embedded onto a show team, and the show's name is The Lead with Jake Tapper. It's a show out of CNN DC's office, which is why I get to work on it. And I get to design graphics for the show. So if there's ever, for example, a poll or a quote that the anchor is referring to when you see the quote on TV. Chances I made it.
Great. Ayushi, your work sounds super exciting, and I'm sure working behind the scenes on these exclusive stories must be a great adrenaline rush. So, yeah, great. I'm actually going to now change focus and move on to Tanisha a little bit, who's actually studied in the UK. So a little bit different from Ishan, Abira, and Ayushi, who studied in the US. Now, Tanisha, you are a Bombay girl and an alumni of Cathedral. And I know, US and the UK are very popular destination among students. And I know you applied to both the countries. So why then did you choose to pick the UK as your study destination? And why in particular did you choose King's and then Imperial?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, the choices were often like the US and the UK. And I picked the UK mainly because I loved that it was so much closer to mainland Europe. And I do like the cultural diversity and what Europe has to offer in terms of travel. So travel is something I was passionate about. And I think that I got the opportunity to go around and explore a bit, being so close to mainland Europe. I also think that in the UK, London is so diverse. I feel like it's so easy to fit in a city like London. Even in university, you usually have only a certain percentage of students who are international. And so maybe I tend to hear from my friends in the US that most of the students are American. But in the UK, you do have that. But most of those people who are British, so to say, are often they've been brought up differently culturally. They're from all over the world. And then, yes, they grew up in the UK and so they're British, but it's so much more diverse. So I feel like it's easy to feel like you belong. So I really like that about choosing the UK over the US. About the universities, so for my undergrad, I went to King's College and I really enjoyed my time there because I got so much time to travel, be involved in societies. There were a bunch of opportunities that I had. And the curriculum was really manageable. I was able to focus on kind of having a more broader range of things that I was involved in. And then I moved on to my master's at Imperial. I chose Imperial specifically because it's known a bit as an entrepreneurial university. So people are very encouraged to think about new ideas, and there's a lot of support in that field. And that's why I was most interested in Imperial initially, because that's something I'd like to do in the future. Unfortunately, I ended up joining Imperial during the middle of the pandemic for my master's. So it wasn't necessarily the best experience in terms of networking and building that entrepreneurial aspect, but that was the reason why I did choose it in the beginning. And at Imperial, I really found that the people that I met were extremely ambitious. I loved meeting everyone. Everyone had such different goals in mind. There were people who wanted to work in startups. There were people who wanted to work in big tech. There were people who wanted to start their own company. Others wanted to do a PhD. I just loved the diversity and yeah.
Thanks, Tanisha, for that. I think hearing your story, I'm kind of thinking back at my days in college. I myself spent many years of my growing up years in the UK. I went to boarding school there, and then I did my degree from University of Manchester. So yeah, my experience in the UK was also fabulous, needless to say. And Tanisha, I was just wondering, if you could shed a little bit of light on how the employment scenario for engineering and science students is in the UK.
Yeah. So in the UK, I feel like it's very competitive, obviously, like a lot of places. And so I do think the salaries are not as high as you would expect them to be, especially if you're looking at doing a tech role, maybe in a bank. It's even more difficult, I think. But on the plus side, I think that it's really easy. The visa issue is not as much of an issue as I understand it is in the US. Usually, if you do get a job and you're sponsored by a company, which most big companies do sponsor, you should be guaranteed your visa, and then you can continue to stay and work here. Obviously, if you want to look at a smaller company and a startup, they might not have the resources to sponsor you. So it's important to think about that while choosing where you want to work. Yeah, another thing I also noticed is that networking is really useful. In universities, we had a bunch of networking events, and you have people from companies come in. I wouldn't say that you can meet these people and they'll give you a referral and you'll be like fast track and get a job. I don't think that's true, but I do think that you can learn a lot from the people that come in from different companies to university. So that's how I started my journey at Google. I met someone who came in to university. I didn't obviously get a referral or anything from them, but I got the opportunity to visit the London office. I had lunch with them, got to know a little more about the application process. And actually, they shared a special internship that they had for, it's called a STEP internship, which was for students in the first and second year of uni, which I hadn't found yet because they hadn't posted the listing. But she shared that with me and she told me the date on which it would open up. And so I applied like the second it opened up. So it gave me that opportunity and that information that I might not have had otherwise.
Tanisha, I couldn't agree with you more. I think networking is really, really important. So for students, so for students who are actually looking at attending some of these selective colleges, my advice would be make sure you're attending all these networking events, signing up for as many clubs and organizations so that you can learn from each other. Moving on to you, Ratan, I think our audience is probably waiting for your insider tips, and I'm sure the students will be hanging on to every word that you have to share with us today. I'm sure you must be looking to recruit motivated self-starters, but apart from that, when you're usually scouting for talent, do you actually look at certain college majors while hiring?
Yes, Mehnaz, we certainly look at specific majors, but in no way is that going to be held against you if you're able to prove your ability to learn the same in a very different capacity. And this is what I mean by that. I have worked to hire software development engineers across two different firms now, Goldman Sachs and Amazon. While the role is still very much that of computer science, which requires you to be able to code, which requires you to be able to solve problems, do data structures, have algorithms. You do not necessarily have to have a degree in computer science or information technology. I have hired individuals with a mechanical engineering degree also who've been able to, on their very own, learn these things on the side. And that to me as a recruiter is even more powerful because I know for a fact that that individual is doing that because he or she really wants to do it and not so much because it's a part of the curriculum, right? So while it certainly helps if it is a part of the curriculum, there is no way that we will be able to say no to talent that is able to prove themselves, and make a very selective bar of individuals who are rightly being hired for doing the roles that they're being asked to do, Mehnaz. I do think this depends on the kind of role that we're talking about as well here, Mehnaz. I'll give you an example. When we used to hire B-School students at Goldman Sachs, you would certainly need to hire finance students for investment banking roles or asset management roles, where a very advanced knowledge of economics, of finance, of the ability to evaluate companies and valuate them at whatever they need to be evaluated at. So I think it varies from the kind of role that you're looking at as well. But I think what we're seeing more so than anything with the launch of these platforms like Coursera and Udemy and so many others is that you can easily attain this knowledge even though you're not, studying it in your business school or in any other, way of formal education, right? So I think those would be some of the things that I would certainly encourage students to consider. Networking is great. And as a person who's managed a lot of these networking events myself, when we used to go into universities, our vested interest of doing these networking events was to be able to scout out talent and really find those diamonds in the rough, if you will, right? So that's how I would answer that question, Mehnaz. Happy to get into further details if you'd like.
Super, thanks for that, Ratan. I was just also wondering your point of view. In the last so many years, we've seen this huge trend in students finishing off with their 12th and pursuing their undergraduate studies at all these global destinations. When you're looking at recruiting talent, do you prefer applicants from international universities?
I think so let me give you an example of how this works. All of our recruitment teams are split up by region, right? So there is a team of Amazon that's focused just on the Asia Pacific campuses. There is a team that's focused just on the EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And there's a team that's focused pretty much on Americas, right? So each of us have our own set of target universities that we scout, talent from. Each of these teams have specific targets that they need to hire. And so I think that's how it works, Manas. There's no specific preference as such, but if you ask me about the absolute value, I think the value that a student coming out from some of these universities that our panelists have joined us from far outweighs the kind of exposure and access, I think, that Indian universities usually have. I wouldn't say that that is the rule. But it certainly is the exception, right? I think just the kind of access and exposure you have as in one of these global universities just is much more, Manas.
Right.
And I think you just have access to do a lot more, to be a part of a lot more associations, to be a part of a lot more clubs, to pursue internships right from your first year or second year, which isn't typically the case of what I've seen, at least within Indian universities.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more, Ratan. And when we're speaking to families, they, there's a typical question that everyone asks us is that I'm spending X amount on my child, and I'm sending them for 4 years to the US. What is typically my return on investment? Because if they don't get a job in the US or they don't get a job in the UK, what happens thereafter? So it's really nice and reassuring to hear that, if you see talent coming out of some of these selective colleges, you definitely give them a once over and definitely give them some sort of a priority in terms of assessing their capabilities and talents.
Yeah. No, so I think there are three things that we look at specifically, Manas. All of recruitment essentially is to assess three major competencies, right? One is the knowledge that an individual possesses, and that I think is the easiest thing to attain. You read something, you become knowledgeable about it. You watch a YouTube video, you become knowledgeable about it. The second thing is skills, right? And that's a slightly more difficult component because there's an application component of your knowledge into the skills. And the third, and I think the most important one, is the mindsets that a candidate is approaching any job for. Right. And that to me is the most critical thing, because your mindsets have been preconditioned because of years and years of thinking a certain way. Right. And Abira, I think, who's a clinical psychologist here, would probably agree with me a little more on this. So these are three things that we assess in all of recruitment: knowledge, skills, and mindsets. While the first two are slightly more easier to assess, it's more difficult to assess mindsets when it comes to recruitment. What we're looking for here is just your ability to be humble enough to understand that while you may have been a great student throughout, you are entering into a new world here when it comes to the corporate world. Are you humble enough to understand how things work in a corporate setup, whether it is in the US, whether it is in the UK, or whether it is in a country like India, to be able to understand what is expected of you and what does success in your role really look like, right? So I think that's how I would answer that, Manas, in terms of specific things that we look for when we're looking at hiring individuals for different roles.
Thank you so much, Ratan, for sharing your insights. And I think in conclusion to our first sort of segment that we've, had the panelists answer and you talk about, your opinion on the job market, I think it's fair to kind of conclude that whether you're a art students or science students, there are perks to every route. And I think it's most important to have the right skill sets and experiences. And I think my advice to students on our webinar today would be to be curious and to explore unique classes while you're at college. And with that, I think I'm going to move on to the next section of our webinar today. And that is where we're going to be learning about the individual experiences that our panelists have had at their colleges, and to learn about what else other than academics did they do to prepare for their careers. And with this, I'm going to actually have Ayushi answer my first question. Ayushi, what opportunities did you undertake at college that facilitated your profile development and readiness for your career role?
So like I mentioned earlier, the way I found journalism was through my college newspaper. I was really interested in photography when I was in high school, and I wanted to keep up that creative outlet in college as well. So I just found that as a medium to take photos. But I really started getting more invested in the journalism aspect of the newspaper and less the photography. So it was a shift from the creative to just breaking the news, covering my campus, holding our administration responsible. It just really clicked with me. And I started pursuing that more. And the way I pursued that was through some things that we've already spoken about. One was definitely networking. I spoke with past alumni from my college newspaper who now work with CNN, ABC News, Washington Post, New York Times, even in India, at the Indian Express, Times of India, they're just spread worldwide. I started taking the few classes that Emory offers in journalism. I remember I took this one class that was Journalism 101, which really prepared me for any internship that I wanted to do. And then during recruitment, I reached out to my career counseling service that helped me tailor my resume and my cover letter to kind of tone my experiences in a way that would show the skills that I have that are applicable to this industry that I don't necessarily have a major in. And all of that, I think, worked along with my passion, and I just kept at it. But networking was probably key, I would say.
Thanks, Ayushi. I mean, you obviously seem to be very motivated, and you knew what you wanted, and you did everything that you could within your realm of control to make sure that you got to where you wanted to get. So amazing, and all the very best of luck with that. And before I move on to my next question for our audience today, our chat box is disabled. If you have any questions, please feel free to use our Q&A box, and we'll address all your questions at the end of our webinar. So my next question actually is for you, Ishan. I know from a very young age, you were always very interested in physics and computer science. And I think when you went to high school, you kind of figured that, engineering is what you want to do. So I'm really curious to kind of know that, at Carnegie Mellon, apart from your academics, what other activities did you kind of undertake that helped you build your profile as an engineer?
Yeah, so in high school, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an engineer. I'm still not sure if I want to be an engineer, but I am figuring it out. And then to answer your question, in college, what I did to kind of build my profile to be an engineer. So at Carnegie Mellon, they give undergraduates the opportunity to be a teaching assistant for most computer science courses. So you basically work with the professors on designing course content and then helping other students debug their code if they're stuck with problems. And I think about 3 to 4 days a week, you just sit from 5 to 8 p.m. helping out other people, grading their work. And the best way to learn how to code well sometimes is just looking at bad code and critiquing code. So that really helped me. And then you get the opportunity to move up the ladder of different computer science courses, be teaching assistants for all of those courses. And the longer you stay, you can get leadership positions. So you learn how to run a team, how to manage different TAs. Besides that, I also worked on a couple of research projects. So I had the opportunity to work on energy. So we were analyzing KFC Thailand's energy usage, and we were optimizing what time they should switch on their ovens, what time they should switch it off. And that was interesting, but now I know I definitely don't want to work at KFC. And then besides that, I also had the opportunity to work on research in self-driving cars. We worked with signals and systems. So just working in different areas of tech helped me eliminate things that I was definitely not interested in. And obviously working in those fields builds your profile too.
Right. So, Ishan, it does seem like in your 4 years at Carnegie, you really did do a lot. You experimented and you were part of so many different projects. So great going there. And moving on to Tanisha, your choice of major is somewhat similar to what Ishan did as well. And I was just wondering why you decided to kind of do a master's program immediately after your undergraduate degree.
Yeah, so I think I had an advantage because I knew that all of my friends were in the US and they did a bachelor's program for 4 years. And in the UK, you do a 3 years bachelor's program and just a 1 year master's. So to start off, you are getting a master's degree in the same amount of time that the people in the US are getting a bachelor's. So it seems like a great time to just keep going and finish off the education side of it. I personally just wanted to do a master's because I felt like the undergrad wasn't enough for me to learn a bit more about more specialized things. During my master's, I got the opportunity to try a lot more different areas. So during my bachelor's, I specialized in AI, which was very niche, and then most of my modules were related to that and machine learning. And then during my master's, I got the opportunity to kind of branch out a little bit, and I didn't specialize, which is not what most people do. It's usually the opposite. But yeah, during my master's, I got to explore like cryptography, a bunch of different things, natural language processing. That was interesting. Yeah, in terms of I think a lot of people decide to do the master's because they think it's going to give you a better job or something like this. But I just think it's important to take it as a learning opportunity and only do it if you think you're going to get some value from that.
Did you think that doing your master's prepared you better for your role and responsibility as an engineer?
So I think that this really depends on the role choice that you want to do. So personally, as a software engineer, whether you want to work at a tech company or whether you want to work at a finance company, I don't think there's much difference between whether you do a bachelor's or a master's. I'm starting off with other people who did a bachelor's at the same level, at the same pay, pretty much in the same role that they are doing. So there's no difference or advantage to having a master's. On the other side, if you want to do something like maybe quant or something a little different that's not pure software engineering, every company has different roles for which they specify what they require. So maybe if you want to do research related fields, you might need a master's or even a PhD. Or I know that as a quant, like some companies require like 2 masters at least to be as the minimum qualification. So in the UK, they're quite specific and you need to look at the jobs that you're looking for.
Thank you so much, Tanisha, for that. I have another question for you, actually. If I were to ask you to give our audience one piece of advice as to how to make the most of the resources available on campus, what would you say?
I think, interesting. I think that on campus, there's just so many opportunities, and the idea is just to say yes to everything. I remember that you have like hackathons, and you also should get a good diversity of the experience that you say yes to, let's say. So you should do something that's a bit career related, computer science related, for example, since I studied that. I also did teaching assistant that helped me keep in touch with what I studied in the past, kind of as a revision, helped me not lose touch of that. And you can also do stuff that's not career related and that you enjoy. Like I was into dance, I was into travel. University has a lot of opportunities for that as well, like a bunch of performances and shows. So I think the value of having a holistic CV is very useful, especially for a master's application, not just for the jobs, but if you're looking for applying for masters, I think it's very useful.
Thank you, Tanisha, for that. And Abira, I'm going to move on to you. Abira, to better prepare yourself as a clinical psychologist, did you kind of partake in any internships? What did you do while you were studying at Pepperdine?
Yeah, so prior to going to Pepperdine, I was interning at a neuropsychology private practice. And that was just to kind of get my foot in the door while doing applications for my graduate school. And once in the program, we were required to take part in what is called practicum. And basically what this is we are actually seeing clients and practicing therapy for the first time. And each hour that we see clients goes towards our 3,000 hours that we need to collect in order to become licensed in the future. So it was kind of a forced internship.
Hours, Abira.
I'm sorry?
I said, sorry to interrupt, but that's a lot of hours.
It is a lot of hours, but it goes by fairly quickly, and there's ways to shorten the time span for you to become licensed, or some people choose to take it slow and enjoy the process. So it's you can tailor it to your lifestyle.
Thank you, Abira, for that. And Ratan, moving on to you, I already see a question in our Q&A box for you. I'm just going to read that out very quickly, and if you can answer that. I'm not really sure if it's within your area of expertise, but nonetheless. What is the job market like for industrial engineers? Do most of the roles require the students to know a little bit of coding, even if they apply to non-CS positions like project management? It's a very specific question.
Yeah, certainly is a very specific question. I don't believe that coding is required to be doing the work of an industrial engineering kind of a role. I'm not sure what the job market really is like for industrial engineers. I imagine with all of us returning to some kind of a normalcy after the last 2 years of us being, virtual, I definitely think it's going to be a little on the little going up a little bit, but I'm not sure specifically if I can say that with absolute confidence. This is not something that I've worked in specifically. However, I am pretty sure that coding is probably not required for a role like this, Manaz.
Thank you, Ratan, for sharing with us your insights. But for the audience and the particular student who asked this question, we can actually get back to you if you send us an email and give you more specific information about this. And Ratan, moving on to just, little bit of a conversation with you. How do you think these students can better prepare themselves for the job market while they're actually studying for their undergraduate degrees?
So I think a couple of things here, right? I think as Tanisha mentioned, try to be a part of any, if any organization is trying to come to your campus to interact with all of you. I think this is a great opportunity for you to understand the organization better, the people better. And I think that's really, half the battle won, right? If you understand what is it that these organizations are looking for and who is it that they're looking for, I think that gives you a big advantage. So that's the first thing I would advise. I think the second thing I would advise is try to stay in touch with your seniors who have made it to the roles that you are possibly vying for and, would like to be there at some point of time in your career. The third is, I would say, try to do internships as much as possible. Even if it is an unpaid internship, it certainly adds value to your resume and to your overall profile. And I think what we're trying to assess that is just what are the skills that you've been able to pick up through that internship. And fourth, what I would say is all of you, I think it's important to create a LinkedIn profile. Start networking with individuals, start networking with leaders also, if you'd like, on LinkedIn. It's an opportunity for all of you to be connected in a professional way with individuals from the organizations that each of you are trying to get into. So I think these 4 things certainly go a long way. Apart from that, there are a lot of coding challenges, competitions. All of these go a long way in making employers think a little more about the kind of overall value that you are bringing to the table as a student and as a possible candidate, right? So if there are so here's what I would suggest a lot, right? If there are any concepts or any competitions that you can take part that exhibit your teamwork, grab those opportunities. Every organization is made of successful teams. And unfortunately, at least from an Indian standpoint, you never really work in teams. You always are pitted against each other. Who's the first rank versus who's the second rank, right? So I think teamwork, the essence of teamwork in many ways is lost out in at least a lot of Indian universities. And so one of the other reasons I really prefer interacting with and also hiring people from outside India in an APAC standpoint is that the concept of teamwork comes to life really once you look over and above the Indian subcontinent. So I think projects like these are really helpful. Competitions like these, having a very good LinkedIn profile certainly helps. And I mentioned this a while earlier as well. Try to go beyond what your academics has asked of you. I think, you know, Coursera and a lot of these avenues give you access to study anything really from an application standpoint in a way that has never before been possible. And I think what's helpful is that each of these are in partnership with a university like Harvard or like one of the top universities, right? So you get a certificate at the end of it as well, which I'm sure at the end of the day will add a lot of value to your resume and to your overall profile.
Thank you, Ratan. And just to kind of, sum up all our learnings from this discussion, I think for students, basically, what you're doing now to build your profile, to apply to some of these selective colleges. I know everybody's working really hard, not only with their academics, but they're also trying to do things outside the school curriculum, right? So what you need to do is you need to continue to do what you're doing now. So like you're participating in individual projects, you're participating in voluntary work, you're participating in things that you are passionate about. I think the important thing here is to continue to do what you really love, even when you're in college. So please remember that. And moving on, sorry, I have a quick question that I'm going to take really quickly. How important are extracurriculars of your high school to get into a good college? So yes, extracurriculars are really important, especially for the US. They are looking at students who have a holistic profile. So while your academics and your data points do form the crux of your application, they also want to know what it is other than your academics that you're passionate about. So as I said earlier, whatever it is that you really love, continue to do that. If you're an athlete, continue with your sports practices, participate in competitions. If you love music, you can put up a virtual performance for an NGO. So there's so many different things that you can do, and do connect with us, if we can help you with your extracurricular profile. And finally, I'm going to very quickly move on to the last part of our webinar today, which is career service support at college. And as I said, just a minute ago, students spent years preparing for college by actually taking challenging coursework and academic projects and internships just to get into some of these colleges. And I'm sure everyone here today really wants to know what kind of support do they actually get from college to help them secure their dream jobs. And so Tanisha, over to you. What kind of resources were available at Imperial that helped you acquire employment at Google?
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about King's actually first, because Imperial was, I joined Imperial during the pandemic. So the experience I had was not very representative of what you might have right now. So during my university at King's, and I presume all universities have this, there was a bunch of career services and career talks, obviously. When I just started out making my CV in my second year of uni, and I didn't really know much about how things should be written or what's the best way to present stuff, I think that they really helped and provided a lot of guidance along the way. And something I guess that's different about UK or probably I'm guessing US universities is that in India, you usually have campus recruiting where these people come in and you have days where you get to interview with a number of companies and then you get offered a job at the end of the day. But in the UK, you usually have to apply on your own. You really have to make that effort to look up the jobs you want to go for. What do they need? Make sure you have the profile that you've built for it. Apply, go through like online coding tests, go through interviews, go through a really long process essentially to get to the final stage. But I did have a couple of friends from Imperial, and they told me that they did, in fact, have a couple of these days where people came in to do on-campus recruitment, which is something that I haven't heard about at other universities. So I think that if they do continue to do this post-pandemic, it's a very good advantage, because people apparently they used to hire like specifically from Imperial, and companies used to come in. So it's a great resource to have.
Tanisha, I'm also a little curious to kind of get your point of view here. In the past, we've always heard students who studied in the UK come back and say that they haven't managed to actually find employment after they've graduated. But now with this post-work visa, has the scenario changed a lot, do you think? Or is it still quite difficult?
I know that you have a lot more time to look for a job. I personally think that if you don't get the job straight out of university, it just gets harder and harder the longer you wait, because people know you haven't gotten a job so far. Like, I feel like it's a self-fulfilling cycle. The longer you wait, they're like, oh, what did you do on the time in between? And then you should have done something useful, should have done a project, should have done something interesting during that time. Otherwise, your value slowly starts dropping. So I think it's really important to start early and start during your second and third year of uni, apply for internships, because that's really how you get it. Especially during the pandemic, things changed a lot because companies stopped hiring, and essentially the students who had done internships got offers, or either companies canceled internships and just offered them full-time roles, or they did like remote internships and still offered them full-time roles, but they really didn't take the effort of hiring outside them because they reduced hiring. And why should they? They've already invested a couple of months in you as an intern. Why should they hire someone completely new? So I know a lot of friends who lost out that way because they hadn't done this in the past during university, and then to start out during your master's, I think is very challenging, because you just don't have the time during a master's program to apply for jobs. It's a very time consuming process of doing your CV and doing like, even if you apply to 5 companies, everyone gives you 2 coding tests. That's like 10 coding tests. And then you move forward, everyone has like 3 more interviews at least. You go in person, virtually. It's just a lot to prepare for.
Wow, you guys really have been working really hard over the last few years. But yeah, circling back, I mean, from, the conversations that I'm having with you all, it seems like, you really do have to start early, and that's the only way to manage to kind of check all the boxes, right? And I think with that, I am going to kind of again change direction and move over to the scenario, the employment scenario, and the support that students get from colleges in the US. And Ishan, if I may, a question for you. And again, this is circling back to the same thing that we discussed a while back about networking. Do you feel that networking with alumni from college helped you in any way get your job at Coinbase at all?
Yeah, I think for software engineering jobs, it's very challenging to get the first round interview. So usually you try to ask someone that's working at the company you want to work for to give you a referral. Usually people give that to people they know, or you've been to the same college, or they've met you in person. So yes, networking is important to at least get to the first stage of interviewing. And then after that, it comes down to your skill. And then as for how I went through this process, my college did a trip to Silicon Valley where we just met a bunch of different companies, a bunch of different people working in the tech industry. And we spoke to them, and we just heard about all the different companies and what they're working on. So during that time, I met someone working at Coinbase, and since then, I've just been interested in the company. And then that person helped me by giving me a referral, and then I just had the first interview, and it went on like that.
Ishan, do you think you could quickly walk us through, the steps for the recruitment process before you finally got the job letter?
Yeah, so I think you apply, make sure you have your resume ready and reviewed, and you can either apply directly on their job site, or you can reach out to someone that's working at the company, get a referral. After that, there is usually one programming test, which will just test your ability in terms of coding. If you pass that, that's usually without a person. If you pass that, then you have a first round interview where you'll go through about a 1-hour exercise. It's a programming interview live with another person, an engineer on the team. And then if you pass that, you have one final offsite interview, which is about 5 to 6 hours. You do about 2 technical projects where you work on a problem that the company is facing and you solve it for them. And I think this varies by company, but at Coinbase, we try to keep it directly related to problems we face and how you can solve that. And then you'll also talk with some people in the business team, talk about your goals, why you want to join. And then after that, it takes about a week or so. They'll review your application, all your interviews, come in a panel together. They discuss how the interviews went, and then you either get the offer or not.
Wow, that really does sound like a grueling few steps, but well done. And moving on to you, Abira, changing focus from engineering and science a little bit to you now. It's interesting that you pursued your undergraduate degree at UCLA, which is a public school, and then you went on to doing your graduate degree at Pepperdine, which is a private school. What sort of differences did you notice, and how would you compare the two?
I would first start with the size of the school. UCLA is very big. It's, the class sizes are going to be anywhere from maybe 20 individuals to, 100 plus, depending on if you're in a lecture hall or what. But, and then at Pepperdine, in my experience being in a graduate program, we were put in cohorts and we were in the same classes with the same 20 people. So it really was a great way to bond with your peers and to create like a really safe and comfortable environment. Whereas my time at UCLA, I was in these bigger class sizes and it was a little bit more difficult socially, but I also maybe didn't put in as much effort as I should have. So I'm not going to blame it on the school because I know a lot of people excel. So that's my experience. And I think I just did better in a smaller environment. And, also in terms of your relationships with your professors at UCLA, I was able to get close to one professor, whereas at Pepperdine, I would say I have a really good relationship with like 5+ professors and talking about networking from the others. All my job offers have been from professors so far. So I think that just kind of, plays a role too.
Wow. And just, to get a little bit of an understanding, at UCLA, were most of your classes taught by professors or graduate students? And was that a big difference that you saw between the two?
I'm trying to remember back. I know that we had a good mix of graduate students and also, doctors and professors. So I think it just depended on whether it was like more of like a elective course versus like a core class that you needed to graduate. And I think the core classes were usually always taught by, doctors. And then at Pepperdine, we kind of had a mix as well. They were either doctors with their PsyD, which is a clinical psychology doctorate, or a PhD in psychology. But there were also some professors that were licensed marriage and family therapists, which is my route, and also associate marriage and family therapist, which is what I am going to be in the next month or so. So it's kind of cool to be able to kind of see that inspiration, because I think I would be interested in teaching, and it doesn't seem so far off in the future as well.
Wow. Your profession really does sound very interesting. And as I said, the need of the hour. But coming back to another question for you, Abira, how did Pepperdine support you in finding internships and then finally permanent employment after graduation?
Sure. So as I stated earlier, we were kind of, part of our program is to do a practicum and work with clients. And in order to find your practicum site, Pepperdine was very sweet, and they gave us a list, an Excel sheet of a bunch of different mental health sites in the Los Angeles area that were hiring, and with all the information that you needed, the email, the phone number, what you need to turn in, resume, cover letter, etc. And it was all very nice and organized. So that was a bit of hand-holding that led us to getting our practicum placements. And in addition, we were also given like mock interviews, things like that. And for now going into the career side, again, you know, our professors are our biggest source right now into finding, you know, opportunities for the future. A lot of our professors have private practices themselves, so they're looking out for like recruiting. And if they're not actively recruiting themselves, they will know through their networking circle, based off of your interests, where they can kind of connect you. And that's been really helpful as well.
Thank you. Hearing from all of you, I do think that all your colleges did, play a significant role in preparing you all for your careers. So that's great news for all our students. And coming to back to you, Ayushi, Emory is a very popular choice amongst our students, and primarily because of its superb Atlanta setting. And of course, they have their notable faculty like, you know, the former President Jimmy Carter and author Salman Rushdie. Can you share with us a little bit about your personal experience at Emory?
Yeah, I loved my time at Emory. I wouldn't change it for anything. Like I said, I was waitlisted, so it's really some element of luck that I ended up there. Like there were very high chances that I wouldn't have gone to Emory and would be in a completely different situation. But I applied to BU and UBC, and those were the two places that I was considering before Emory. But what I really preferred about Emory was the city, was the setting, and how good its psychology program is. Though I'd applied undecided, I knew that that was what I was interested in. So those were the classes I started taking right off the bat. And what really stuck out to me at Emory was just how well I fit in. The faculty was amazing. I found great extracurriculars, and through that, a good group of friends in my freshman year on itself. So I never really felt like I was in a new place or this was something out of my comfort zone. And through that, I also found my passion. So it just seemed like everything clicked. The city is also a great opportunity for employment. There's so many companies that are headquartered out of Atlanta. CNN itself is headquartered out of Atlanta. There's Coca-Cola, a lot of new banks coming up, and as well, and in terms of like healthcare, Emory University Hospital is one of the biggest employers in the state. So there's something for everyone. A lot of film shootings as well, like just a very diverse city. And Emory was located very conveniently close to the city as well. There's also another campus called the Oxford campus, which is smaller, that you can choose to go for your first 2 years and then move to the main campus that is closer to Atlanta. And that also is very well situated for people who want to build up their resume to have good leadership opportunities, because you're only there for like an associate degree. So that campus only has freshmen and sophomores, so in your first 2 years of college. So you can add being a president of a club just in your second year of college, which is pretty unheard of for most other campuses.
I think hearing all your stories, I completely forgot about the time. And yeah, we've already spent 1 hour listening to you all and your amazing stories. And, I have to say, Ayushi, I totally agree with you. And at the Red Pen, when we're advising students, we always tell them that eventually you will get to the college that is the right fit for you. So, this process of application can be very tedious. And, students are kind of multitasking. They're working on the academics, they're working on their profile. And it does get very, very tiring and exhausting for them. But I'd like to say that eventually, you all are going to find a university and you all are going to be happy there. And that's what's most important. Everything else can be managed. And lastly, over to you, Ratan. I think, to kind of end our discussion here today, just a couple of questions for you. As we discussed earlier, families often come back and say, what is the return on investment of a child coming back to India? If you can share with us what would be the typical starting salary of an engineer and how quickly would they be able to climb the ladder?
Yeah, so there used to be a point in time when organizations used to have offices in India, particularly in IT hubs like Bangalore and Hyderabad, simply because talent was cheaper here. And that's changed a lot over the last few years. Today, it's more of a talent first kind of hub for a lot of these organizations, whether it's a Google or an Amazon or a Goldman Sachs. A lot of these organizations have their second biggest offices outside of their headquarters, whether that's Seattle or New York or California, where a lot of these tech hubs are based out of. India happens to be a very strategically great place to be in because of the availability of engineers that India has and the availability of quality engineers I'd add to that, right? You can certainly compare the compensations that Indian engineers are getting today to engineers from some of the best places in the world, like London and like, the US, particularly from a cost of living standpoint as well. We've certainly seen increases in salaries, and I'll give you at least in my organization, the starting salary for engineers is between 25 to about 27 lakhs per annum. It takes about 2 to 3 years for you to actually grow into the next level because you need to be a subject matter expert, and that takes time in any new job that you start off. And as time progresses, you go up the ladder with the pace that you set for yourself, right? I think more than anything else, you as an employee set the pace at which you want to take your career forward. So I think it's certainly coming to a point where it's certainly good. The kind of compensations that people are expecting today are certainly better than what it used to be. I think it's only going to grow from here. But I do think that strategically, a lot of organizations are being based out of India now because of the quality of talent that we have and because of the quality of engineering, prowess that we can boast of, at least in the IT hubs of Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Delhi to some extent as well, Menas.
Thanks, Ratan. I'm sure all our parents must be very reassured knowing that it's not always bad to, study abroad and come back to India. There are lots of different avenues that can be explored. One last question before we end for you, Ratan. If you were to go back in time and give your 17-year-old self a piece of advice, what would that be?
I would do exactly what everybody here has been, sharing, right? Like Tanisha talking about the kind of events that she used to go for. Just being more active as a student. I think I was not the most. I don't think I maximize and optimize the time that I spent at college. I didn't really take part in a lot of events that a lot of organizations had kind of hosted for me. I don't think at the time there were as many also, to be honest, but I think I could have done more there. And I think the second thing is just to be able to engage and try to understand a little more about competitions and the type of skills I could build through in events and competitions like that. I would always just think of it as something that's over and above and not really pay as much attention to it. So those are two things I think I would really look at and probably redo given the chance, and probably advice I'd give to my 2 children now when they start off their education journey as well.
Thank you. That's great advice for all our audience here today. And with that, I think we have managed to answer all the questions in our Q&A box. It's been wonderful having you all and speaking to each and every one of you. Thank you so much, Ratan, for taking out the time from your busy schedule and away from your beautiful boys, and wishing you happy Father's Day in advance. I hope you have a great day tomorrow. And thank you, Ishan. Thank you, Abira. Thank you, Ayushi. Thank you, Tanisha. I know the timing of our webinar was a little bit strange for all of you, either early morning or late in the night. So thank you all for staying up late and waking up early and being part of this discussion. I'm sure the audience are very, very motivated, and I've learned so much from you all. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.